You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Stop laughing! And when I do, start.
Also, y'all did some nasty-ass jokes on my ass, too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You f***ing guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why Are You Laughing? A History of Comedy podcast. And today, I am pleased to introduce to you the legendary Albert Brooks, a guy who, my introduction to Albert Brooks was, I guess based on my age, Finding Nemo, of course. But really also, what I know him as is not necessarily a guy I was a fan of, but I remember seeing him in things when I was young and always thinking like, oh, I'd like to see more of that guy in this. Like when I was old, he was in a season of Weeds, I think, and he was the dad, and This Is 40. And so before I really knew the history of Albert Brooks and how respected he was in comedy, he was kind of a magnetic figure that would pop up in stuff. And then when you hear the more invested I got in the history of comedy and things like that, you would hear the name Albert Brooks and what a legend he was and how much he was respected. And it's interesting because he's a guy who is pretty rare definitely in modern culture, where he has a mystique to him, where he did everything he wanted to do and nothing more. And, there's not 10 million projects that are in your face. Even his most popular stuff might not be in the everyday zeitgeist of pop culture or anything. But he did everything he wanted to do, and he was respected for it. So he's the type of guy that we talk a lot about on this show that I really love and end up growing to love more when I learn the history of them. So we will dive into Albert Brooks in a moment, right after I tell you to go to blindmike.net. That's where you can support this show. Wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. All that helps more people find the show in the old algorithm. If you're listening on any platforms that you get podcasts, leave a 5-star review and tell your friends about it. Also, if you want early access and bonus episodes, you could have had this episode weeks ago, as well as some of the bonus content that we do. And to access that, all you got to do is become a member on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you get access to bonus Why You Laughings. You get these first few Why You Laughings that we're releasing. We're like months ahead of pre-recording, so you could have had these a while ago. And we also do bonus episodes of the Blind Mike Project. We've done TV watch-alongs and drinking games and all kinds of wacky stuff back there. So consider becoming a member and support the show. We appreciate you guys.
Those drinking games may disappear quickly.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's also missing. So get there while it lasts. But let's get into it. Let's get into the history of Albert Brooks, who's a guy that, like I said, he reminds me a lot of, he's a figure kind of like Martin Mull to me. I think a lot of people would consider him a bigger figure in comedy than Martin Mull. But I have the same connection with him, like I said, where I always liked him and stuff. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized the impact he had on comedy. And a lot of people have compared him to Martin Mull, who we did an episode on last year, where their styles are very similar. I think a lot of people naturally, with any type of alt kind of comedian, the natural instinct is to go Andy Kaufman. But Albert Brooks let you in on the bit a lot more. I compare him, given his movie track record, he reminds me of kind of a combination of Woody Allen and Christopher Guest, where he would get into the minutia of human behavior in his films, but some of it was a little more absurd than the route Woody Allen would go. But let's start at the very beginning, where Albert Brooks is from a entertainment family, a Hollywood family, where his father was famous for being on the radio, and that's where our history begins here.
Your father's in the business. You lost your father at an early age. It's a very sad story. He died performing at a Friars Club roast on stage, Park Your Carcass, and that was a loss that clearly had a huge effect on you.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. And
he says something in the documentary that I didn't know. And when I heard it, I couldn't believe it. He said that when he was a kid, he used to go to sleep with the radio on. And his mother would come in while he was sleeping and turn it off at night. And one morning he woke up and the radio was still on.
It was like 3 a.m.
3 a.m. he woke up and he said he knew at that point that his father had died.
Because your father had been sickly. And
yeah,
you were
but he was sick my whole life. You know, he was healthier from my brothers, but by the time I was born, it was not good, and he had trouble walking. So for my life, he was ill, always ill.
Yeah.
So I was always worried about it. So it wasn't like a premonition. I thought this was happening every day.
I remembered you, I had heard about it, and then you and I got to have a dinner once, and you told me the story, and it's absolutely unbelievable. He was on the Friars Club dais, and it's 1958, and he destroys. I mean, absolutely destroys, and he's the hit of the night.
You can listen to it.
Yes, I've listened to it.
Yeah.
And then he goes back and he sits down at his seat and passes away. And it's weird because it's the thing that comedians talk about sometimes, almost in a wistful way. Like, I'd love to kill in front of a crowd and then just quickly go.
Yeah.
And what I'm always amazed at is that he finished. You know,
he finishes.
It could happen on the way up to the mic. It could happen during, but he finished.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the coolest part.
Harry Einstein went out on a high note. Yes, he was Park Your Carcass was the character he played. He was known on the Eddie Cantor show and was a staple of the Friars Club. If you're wondering why Conan is talking to Albert Brooks and Rob Reiner, why Rob Reiner is interjecting in this so much, they were very close for many, many years, and we'll get into that in a moment. But Rob Reiner made a documentary about Albert Brooks's life that's still on HBO. I recommend you go watch it if you like this episode. They talk a lot about his father, Harry Einstein. And by the way, you probably heard legend that Albert Brooks, his name is in fact Albert Einstein, which he said, I think he's the 4th boy in his family. And Albert Brooks said, by the time I was born, the theory of relativity, you know what I'm saying.
Theory of relativity
seemed like it was sticking around was the joke. Albert delivers it a lot better than I did, but obviously changed his name because the name Albert Einstein would have been very difficult to deal with in showbiz. But his father, Harry Einstein, was big on the radio. And of course, Bob Einstein, who you may know as Super Dave Osborne or Marty Funkhauser from Curb Your Enthusiasm, also a hilariously funny guy that was in the entertainment business. So came from a funny family, went out on a high note on the Friars Club roast. It was actually for, I forget if they said it in that clip, it was for Lucy and Desi being honored at the Friars Club, which Lucy was the first female admitted into the Friars Club, the first woman that was part of a roast there or anything. So like kind of a big show in that way. And Harry Einstein performed and then peacefully died after killing. That is on YouTube, by the way. I watched it. You can go watch it on your own if that interests you. I didn't know if all the jokes necessarily held up from Park Your Carcass, but you can go check it out if that appeals to you. But I think this is the best part of the story that Albert is about to tell.
Your father, they're working on him backstage. Milton Berle says to a singer at the time,
Tony Martin,
go up there and sing
number one hit in America.
And he says, sing.
And Milton Berle didn't know what the song was. He says, go sing your hit. Tony Martin stands up and he sang, and his hit was called There's No Tomorrow.
Fuck.
There's no tomorrow.
While they're working on your dad.
Just a great, and that's how a comedian is born, is hearing that story and being able to laugh at it. And Albert, probably in large part because of his father, grew great passion for the radio. He had his dad's old tapes and would play them for friends. He did bits that were kind of based in radio on some of his albums. And for a long time, he called into the Larry King show. He would call Larry late at night when Larry was on the radio and do bits and just have conversations. And I did also listen to Albert on Howard Stern. And Howard was doing that thing where he's like, how can you like Larry King? And Albert was like, I like him for the same reason I like you, actually. And Howard was like, ah, damn. Howard didn't want to admit they had the same skill and ability, but Larry King's one of the greatest. I love to shout him out on any episode I can. But they were definitely friendly over the years, at least from an entertainment standpoint. But his dad not being around, like he said, his dad was sick his entire life, so he didn't really know him. Like even at that young age, his dad dying was no real surprise, but did obviously have an impact on him in terms of influence, for sure. Because like I said, he held on to those albums and would play them a lot as a kid.
Next, we're going to the WTF podcast.
So is he talking about the Reiners here? I think is the first one. Yeah. So this kind of explains why Rob Reiner is with him. They've been friends for, I think, 60 years or more at this point. And Albert explains that story.
When you were a kid, were you over at their house all the time?
No, I didn't even meet him till high school.
Yeah.
So in high school, I had lost my dad, and Carl was like a surrogate father.
So was that part of the dynamic between you and Rob? I mean, did he sense that? Did you feel like, come stay at my house? It's fun and,
No, Rob was dealing with his own issues of being Carl Reiner's son, natural issues.
Yeah.
So, Rob was on one track, but I wasn't the son.
Yeah.
So I sort of had my own dynamic.
Right.
He was Carl, and I could go hang out if Rob wasn't there.
And I see.
Yeah, he was like,
he was happy to have
like a surrogate dad.
Come in and entertain.
Well, I didn't have to entertain. I mean, it was sort of tempting to see, especially if he had Mel and other famous comic people
hanging around.
Yeah, and people would sit around and talk, and eventually everybody would be funny.
Yeah.
And then you would find out, I can be funny too here.
So we've done an episode on Carl Reiner, not our most popular by any means, but I really enjoyed talking about Carl Reiner because he was not just a hilarious guy, but kind of did things the right way, an admirable guy in entertainment as well. And Albert Brooks had him as this father figure, and as you hear him talk about there, it's interesting and kind of rare when you talk about people in comedy. It's rare to have this father figure who is a funny guy, but also you don't have that conflict of being his son. There's not that butting heads element there that I'm sure Rob Reiner dealt with. And Albert tells a funny story in the documentary, Defending My Life, I believe. It's called Albert Brooks Defending My Life on HBO if you want to check it out. But he tells the story that he knows, like when he's young, he knows Eddie Cantor and Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. Like they were at the house when he was very young. So he kind of knows these people a little. And he went to a school in California where there's a lot of famous kids there. Richard Dreyfuss also went there, the sons of some other famous people as well. And he went up to Rob Reiner, not knowing who he was. There was just a guy in his class. And he goes, I know Carl Reiner. And Rob Reiner goes, yeah, so do I. It was very, very funny the way he told it in the documentary, but they became friends and were close for many, many years. And he talks about Carl Reiner giving him great advice and Rob Reiner being a help throughout his career. So that was a big thing. This kid that lost his dad still did have this influence to help him through his route in comedy. So pretty interesting path that he took as a young man.
Next, we have radio to TV.
Yeah, so he started in radio as well, same as his father, and then out of that kind of became a television star that had this comedy act that is also very interesting. The way he got into comedy is unlike anyone we've ever talked about before.
So I used to work on the radio with Gary Owens.
Yeah.
And I had that dummy bit. And I came up with that just at a party with my friends.
Yeah.
And Gary Owens, there was a CBS afternoon show in Los Angeles. There was a weatherman named Bill Keane, and he had a show, a little talk show called Keane at Noon.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there for 2 weeks, and Gary Owens took over.
Yeah.
And Gary Owens said, hey, want to come on and do that dummy thing? And I did. And that was basically the first time I did it on television.
How old were you?
21.
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
And from that, got a kinescope, found an agent, and then I immediately got that in 3 months later, 3 Steve Allen shows.
Yeah, so he starts doing the dummy bit we'll play in a second, but he does these bits that he practices in his bathroom or his bedroom, whatever. And he kind of just rehearses them himself. And he's doing stand-up, but not in a way that anyone had ever really done it before. Like I said, Andy Kaufman, but not really. Like Andy Kaufman, the joke was always on the audience. Albert Brooks had more of these bits. He kind of called them theater pieces in a way. But he was able to do them and get on these shows without being in a comedy club, which is a route that I've never heard anyone take before. Now, granted, I'm sure, having Carl Reiner and Rob Reiner in your corner probably helped that. I don't know that Rich Voss would be able to tell that story or someone of that nature. So I'm sure nepotism or whatever you would call that helps in a way. But like I looked at that as a positive thing where he talks about Carl Reiner's influence on him. Like he had a film that he wanted to make, and we'll talk about his passion for the movies he made and everything. But he had a film he wanted to make, and he went to Carl Reiner and said, "I want you to direct this." And Carl read the script and said, "You have to direct this." He's like, I have no vision for this. Like, you have to direct. So legitimately, he had this influence in his life that didn't just like hand him everything, actually gave him good advice and kind of helped him become the guy that he was. So he would go on all these variety shows. Like he mentions, I think in the Conan or Maron interview, that most people know, like they think like, oh, Carson gave him his big break. He goes, name a variety show, and I was on it. Johnny Cash, Merv Griffin, Ed Sullivan. He's like, I did 100 of these variety shows before I ever got Carson. But kind of because that's how he had to make his name. Like bookers that went to comedy clubs weren't seeing Albert Brooks. So again, a pretty interesting path that he used these other late night shows and variety shows as sort of his farm system to get recognized. But this is we have the dummy bit now, right?
No, he just talks about his style of comedy first.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's hear that first because that might set this up.
Shown everywhere. And then I got offered Ed Sullivan, Hollywood Palace, Dean Martin.
Yes.
And I chose Dean Martin.
Yeah.
So I did the Dean Martin show in the fall of 68. And the producer of that show said, "You got other stuff?" And I said, "Yeah," which you say when you don't.
Yeah.
He said, "You got 6 summer shows."
Wow.
So he booked me on the Dean Martin Gold Digger show for 69.
Yeah.
And I had 4 months to decide, what kind of comedian am I?
Yeah.
What do I want to do?
Right.
So I liked these bits.
Yeah.
I liked these, I could almost like scenes in a movie in my mind.
Right.
And I came in about 3 weeks before the show. He wanted to see what I had come up with.
Right.
And I did 3 things, and he looked at me and he said, "Here's what I'm thinking."
Yeah.
He said, "You're here," and he put his hand up very high.
Yeah.
And the audience is here, and he put his hand down low.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're going to have a lot of trouble in your life." and I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." This is all I think is funny. And he was a very dramatic guy, and he looked at me for a long time and he went, "Do it. I just wanted to hear you say that." He said, "If you were my son, I wouldn't let you do it because I know what's ahead."
It's a great, I actually like when I hear stories like that because there's another one I've heard. It's actually Michael Che, of all people. I've heard people say this about Michael Che, that the advice that Michael Che gives when young comedians ask him like how to get on SNL or how to get into stand-up or whatever, he always says, "You're never going to make it. You should quit." And the reason he thinks that's the best advice is because if that person goes, "Fuck Michael Che," then they're a real comedian. And if they crumble and they're like, "Oh God, Michael Che told me to quit," then they were never going to make it anyways. And that's kind of the story that Albert Brooks said there, where he's like, "This guy told me, like, what are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like it's going to be a very difficult road for you. The audience doesn't really understand you. And Albert Brooks is like, "Well, so what?" you know. And not to reference the documentary again, but there's another story he tells where just go watch the documentary. It's better than this. But anyways, but if you're still here, then this story was a good one where he goes, he said someone, asked him, why do you always have to take the more difficult road? How come you can never take the easy road? And he goes, see, the problem, the disconnect here is you think I see two roads. And unfortunately, I don't. He's like, I'm stuck in this world where I can only do things this way. I can't imagine doing it the way someone else wants me to do it, which is, I think, is lacking in a lot of, and we'll hear Albert talk about it a little bit, which is very interesting. A guy that's been around as long as he has, talking about algorithms and stuff. But what I think is very interesting in this time where people will do stuff, and I've even done this with like the way you title shows and things like that. You are almost a slave to the algorithm in some respects. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that completely kills a certain level of creativity, or if people are able to come out of it. Like with what we do, I don't care that I have to title the episode with Albert Brooks's name first. That doesn't mean anything to me, really, instead of Why You Laughing. But like if there was something more that you had to squash down, I wonder if that guy ever comes out of it. Like I wonder if an algorithm world, if a guy like Albert Brooks ever succeeds, because his story is kind of the antithesis of that, which is why I found him so interesting.
Next, we have the dummy bit.
Yeah, so this is what he said was basically like his Hey Jude. Like this is what he would play if he said the reason he didn't do this more is because he got sick of it. But if he ever needed a guaranteed laugh, this is kind of his signature bit was the ventriloquist bit.
Wherever we go, whatever we do, we're gonna go through it together. We may not go far, but sure as a star. Wherever we are, it's together. Wherever I go, I know Danny goes. Wherever I go, Dave better go or I can't talk. No fits, no fights, no feuds, and no egos. Amigos together. Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, hello, everybody. I'm Danny, and I'm Dave. It's certainly a pleasure being here on the Ed Sullivan Show. Danny, we got paid already. What did you do with your money? Well, Dave, I bought myself a bicycle. You bought yourself a bike, huh? Yep. You have to pedal it? No, I don't. No. Then it must be a motorbike. No, it's not. No. Just a minute now, Danny. I'm not the
This is very interesting to me because I'm listening to Craig have the same adventure that the audience did, where at first he's like, it sounds like he's bombing, where the audience is like, what the fuck is this? And I didn't hear Craig laughing either. And then as it goes, his laughs have been bigger. I'm enjoying it.
Well, you realize what he's doing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the brilliance of this, where you come out and like now I think it's something that you would spot from a mile away because this sort of act has been tread upon, but no one had ever really done this before. Guys like Albert Brooks and Andy Kaufman, and Albert Brooks is much more in on it with the, like he's willing to let you in more than I think Andy Kaufman ever was,
for sure.
Which is a style I think I appreciate a little more. But yeah, like he's not afraid to go out there and have the audience think, oh, this poor guy's bombing. And he's like, I'll just let it, I'll let them catch me. I'll let them catch up to me.
Well, he doesn't change his voice. He doesn't try to hide that his mouth's moving.
It's great. Yeah.
And when he just goes, nope, no, I don't. When the dummy's saying that, he takes his hand out from behind him and shakes his head no for him.
Let's finish it up.
To pedal it, and it's not a motorbike. How do you get anywhere? Well, I don't have to pedal it, but I don't have to get anywhere either. Oh, Danny. You know, I got to admit, Danny, I'm a little nervous. This being our first time on the Ed Sullivan Show and everything. Well, why don't you have a cigarette? That always calms you down. Well, I just can't have a cigarette and leave all these people sitting here. They might get bored. I'll sing a song while you have a cigarette. Good idea. What are you going to sing? Swanee River. Great. You ready? Ready anytime you are. Go. Way down the front.
that's the kind of thing Albert Brooks would do. He had a lot of these where it was kind of this theme with a few different variations where he would be an animal trainer or animal wrangler, whatever it was. He did a mime, which I think we have Rob Reiner and Albert Brooks talking about a little bit, but the mime bit was very funny, where they play that in the documentary as well, where he goes, he comes out and he's just talking as a mime. And he's just explaining everything he does. And he's doing a stair motion, which looks like he's walking up the stairs, but he goes, I'm walking up the stairs now, and you know that because I'm performing it for you. And he's like literally explaining it, which is very funny. So like different variations on those bits. And he probably could have killed for years on stage doing that stuff. But he said he felt like it just got very repetitive to him. Like he had kind of done it. He'd mastered it and done it. And it's interesting to me because a name we got suggested when we did, I did the top 19 living stand-ups a few months ago. And a name that was suggested somewhat frequently was Albert. They go, hey, what about Albert Brooks on this list? And I was like, is Albert Brooks really a stand-up? Which is an argument I've had a lot with myself, Craig. When I was doing when I had the big board, I was really toiling over that. Is Albert Brooks a stand-up? And ultimately, my answer is no, because he didn't really like stand-up. He didn't perform it. He didn't go out to clubs, anything like that. But in a weird way, he did have a massive impact on stand-up, because we've talked about this a lot, where now the definition of alt comedy is just like, I guess, like kind of a liberal. They're really, it's a very loose definition for all. And I think Mike Cannon gave it the best. I quote this a lot, where he said, alt comedy somehow came to mean anyone that was afraid of Patrice O'Neill and Rich Voss calling them gay when they walked into the comedy set. I think is a great line. Because that is what it means. But to alt comedy, like what I think of alt comedy as is Andy Kaufman, Steve Martin, Albert Brooks, Martin Mull. Even now, like I would say someone like Bo Burnham is an alt comedian. Like these guys that are doing something other than, like I don't look at Patton Oswalt and think, oh my God, that's so different than stand-up. It's just a guy standing on stage telling jokes. So to me, Albert Brooks was true alt comedy and did break down a lot of barriers in what people were used to, and would mock in his act the idea of Shecky Green, or even like you saw him doing it with these ventriloquist acts or things that were popular like a generation or two before him. He was kind of mocking those and tearing them down a little bit. And what's amazing to me is that there's so much discussion around comedy right now, and like what is hack, what is selling out, all this stuff. And there's no one parodying it. That's what's really amazing to me is like there's all these guys. Anthony Jeselnik, also in the documentary, says he's like, you know what Albert Brooks did is like make fun of these things instead of talking about them. And I was kind of like, yeah, you should do that too. Why don't you do that instead of going on all these podcasts and trashing Tony Hinchcliffe and Joe Rogan and these guys? It seems so easy to tear them down through mockery, like through making fun of them. I know Tim Heidecker tried, but like Kill Tony seems like such a mockable thing, where if you have real commentary and insight and you think it's bad for comedy, do a bit about it. Like make joke, like do an actual parody of it or something like that. And that's what Albert Brooks understood, is he was able to comment on all these things throughout his career without directly saying, I don't like this. He just understood that through his art.
Next, we have live TV.
So this is like they mentioned what I was just talking about, where he would do all these bits without performing them in clubs or anything. It was just kind of raw and essentially a first attempt, at least in front of a live audience.
No, but he would do this, and we shared a house together, and I don't remember it exactly, but he did the first time he did the mime piece. I don't think it worked. Did it work the first time you did it?
Well, the very first time, I don't think it worked. It was the Steve Allen show.
Yeah, it worked. So
nobody knew anybody.
The point is, he came out. He was doing a mime. And he came out in the white face and the leotards, and he never stopped talking.
It's so funny.
And so it's a brilliant piece, and it didn't play the way it should have. And then time goes by, and I think you were called to do the Tonight Show or something. Yeah. And I said, Albert, what are you going to do on the show tonight? He says, I'm going to do the mime piece. And I said, yeah, but it didn't do well. He says, yeah, but it's funny.
Yeah.
I said, I know it's funny, but it didn't get the kind of, he says, yeah, but it's funny. And that's the thing that I learned about Albert, which is, it is funny. The audience has to catch up to it. They just have to know it. And Johnny Carson was hosting, and he came out, and the same kind of thing where they were a little bit hesitant. They didn't know. Johnny went.
Yeah.
And I was there. Johnny literally fell off his chair, and the audience said, I see.
Yes.
I get what this is.
And he talks about how you can tell Albert Brooks has a little resentment towards the audience too, because he talks a lot about how it was so huge for his career that Johnny Carson found him funny, because like the audience would look at him and say, "Oh, is Johnny laughing? Oh, I guess we're allowed to laugh." You know,
we have permission.
Yeah, we have permission now. Johnny thinks this is funny, even though it's weird. And I think some of that resentment he has for the audience is because it's accurate, but also like when he describes his mother, he said he wanted to call his book "What Did Johnny Think?" because he'd call his mom and go, "What'd you think?" And she'd go, "Well, did Johnny like it? What did Johnny think?" And he's like, "Well, I'm asking you what you thought. Who gives a fuck what Johnny Carson thought?" But there was, and I, myself included, people bash the internet and social media a lot now. But the beauty of it is you don't have these gatekeepers now. Like Johnny Carson didn't necessarily have to find you funny in order for you to make it or be successful. But luckily, Albert Brooks was one of those guys who Johnny understood and was able to make it through. And from that, get a lot of opportunities.
This is taking risks.
Yeah, so this is kind of what feeds into what I'm talking about, where like I don't know that this temperament exists in comedy all that often. People take risks in different ways now, I suppose, but not in the creative way that guys like Albert did.
That you made it okay for everybody to sort of work.
I mean, with respect to people, the audience is the last to know anything. I never understood the idea of doing it for an audience, because the audience doesn't know anything until they see it. So if you do anything they haven't seen before, you don't get immediately rewarded. Like when you're previewing a movie with cards, the movies that get 100 are the movies they've seen every other weekend.
Right. They're familiar.
They're familiar.
Yeah.
Unfamiliar doesn't get a good grade. Yeah. But what do? You just never do it.
Yeah.
But it's the same. Right. It's the same if we go into a restaurant and it's a fine restaurant and we're served a dish. We don't know anything about this. We take the word of the person who owns the restaurant, and we taste something we've never tasted. And if the world didn't have that possibility, and by the way, I think show business that's the holy grail, is no risk.
Yeah.
And I think as algorithms get mature and as more executives get parking spots, the risk is less and less, because it's a business. Why do you want to take a risk?
Yeah, and I wonder if Ricky Gervais would consider Albert Brooks a huge influence on him, because like going through a lot of his filmography, I saw a similarity in some of like Ricky Gervais's TV shows to Albert Brooks's movies. Like Afterlife, obviously The Office, but like Afterlife and Extras and some of the ones he did after The Office, to me, reminded me of these Albert Brooks films where, and same with Woody Allen's movies, similarly, in that they weren't these, like, they weren't even necessarily obviously comedies, like they were a little more subtle than a lot more subtle than Animal House or Caddyshack or things that were massively popular at that time. And Albert Brooks is taking these risks and just saying like, well, these are the movies that interest me. And it's why he does have this mystique to him. And it's why there is something like interesting about Albert Brooks. It's why, we can still see him at 77 years old or whatever he is now, and not think like, oh, enough of this guy, like he's a rare guy that didn't oversaturate himself in comedy. And it's hard to kind of step back, especially now with social media. It was probably easier in Albert's day, but I think it is difficult to not take every opportunity. Like in a lot of the interviews I watched, he would talk about not wanting to do a lot of interviews. And he would say things like, well, how much do people need to hear me talk, really? But I do think there is more of a choice there where they're like, I'm not going to be in everyone's face. I'm not going to be like Kevin Hart, where people are like, oh, God, this guy again? Does he have to be in every goddamn commercial?
He's got to be in every commercial, Saudi Arabia comedy fest.
Albert Brooks, I don't think would have taken that.
Next, we have SNL.
So this was an interesting story that Lorne Michaels kind of wanted to frame SNL around Albert Brooks.
Those guys approached you about building SNL around you, and you said, "I think," and you said, "I think that's a mistake."
Well, here's the thing. It's 50 years ago, and maybe Lorne has another memory of it, but it wasn't that complicated. In the fall of '74, I went to a meeting, and they said, because that was Johnny Carson's rerun night, and they said, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to put an original show. We want to do it live from New York, and we'd like it to be Albert Brooks' show. You would be the host. Now, I had flirted with television twice before, and thank God, the way the life works, I didn't do it.
Yeah, so he goes on to describe a couple instances where he had TV shows that didn't work out for a variety of reasons, basically things he said and having to deal with management and all that kind of stuff that felt like a headache to him, and it was something he didn't want to deal with. And because of those experiences, he was like, I don't think I want to do SNL, which is a remarkable choice at that time, because you think of how different that just history would be. Because if Albert Brooks takes that gig as host of SNL, it kind of becomes the Albert Brooks show. If Albert Brooks is the face walking you through SNL every single week, it's the Albert Brooks show, which means even if it lasts 10 years, eventually it just ends.
Right.
Even if they replace him someday, 10 years in, Albert Brooks doesn't want to do it anymore. They replace him. People go, hey, fuck this guy. He's no Albert Brooks. And ultimately it probably ends up failing. So Albert Brooks not taking that deal really changed history, but he gets more into the story of why he didn't take it here.
Oh, and then earlier on, I was going to do a sitcom that I backed out of in a meeting that was already a go. Aaron Spelling was producing it. It was a whole season approved. And Michael Eisner, the last question, said, well, let me ask Albert, though, what do you see for this character in 5 years? And I said, suicide. And I stood up and I said, I'm not ready. This is not going to work. And I left, and the agents followed me into the elevator, and one of them said, you should wait. And the other said, I don't think he should do it. And so after those two, I was done with television. I wanted to make movies. So I wasn't going to do the Albert Brooks show, but I also thought that they were talking to somebody from Los Angeles. And when they said we're doing a live show at 11:30 in New York, to me, live meant nothing. It was no live. I didn't see anything that I wasn't supposed to see. If somebody in New York said a swear word, it was,
you mean like shit?
It was cut out long before I saw it. So I had a couple of thoughts. I said, well, wouldn't it make more sense? I mean, The Tonight Show, in essence, is live. They never stop. What if you did one at 4:30 and one at 7:30 and put the best together to air? But they wanted live, and obviously it worked. It was but I knew that I would be John Belushi. I'd be on 8 grams of Coke. I'm not good starting at 11:30. It's why I hated The Road. Yeah. I never got that third show at midnight. It just didn't make sense to me. It's too late, too much. So I said, and I said, every show has the same host. You should use different hosts each week. So they said, okay, well, thanks for coming in. Then 4 months went by. They hadn't done anything yet. They came back to me. We want you associated with the show. What do you want to do? I said, I want to do short films. Yeah. So I made an agreement to do it. I did them here. And for that, in the spring of '75, Lorne and I did the national junket.
That's a great story too, because it's two guys, not just Albert Brooks. It's two guys really knowing themselves and what they wanted. First of all, I think it's so refreshing when you in an industry of just whores that'll do anything for attention. I love hearing Albert Brooks be like, it's on too late. I can't I can't do that. Which also explains why he obviously didn't have the stand-up bug. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of guys that just would have done that and would have gotten addicted to drugs or whatever it would be just to get through it, like he said. And he knew himself well enough just to be like, the road isn't for me. Staying up that late isn't for me. But also, I think he didn't want to be stuck to do a television show, whatever that was, whether or not he had a full understanding of what SNL was going to be. He didn't want to do it. And you can thank Albert Brooks, I guess, for having a different host every week, it sounds like. But Lorne Michaels also knowing, well, I want this show to be something different than anything that's on television right now. So I want Albert Brooks. Albert Brooks doesn't want to host it. I'm still going to come back to him 4 months later and say, what can we do to get you involved in this? So like, even like my generation probably thinks of like those digital shorts, or like the commercials they would do, things like that as you know, our version of this. But Albert Brooks is kind of the reason they would have these short films on SNL or doing anything other than sketch, is because Albert Brooks kind of paved the way. And I said, I want to do this weird thing. And it may have never happened because I think the third episode of SNL, Rob Reiner hosted, and Albert Brooks submitted a short film that was 13 minutes long. And Lorne Michaels was like, I can't, you fucking nuts. I can't show this. It's too long. And Albert was like, well, you can't cut it. This is what I want to do. And because Rob Reiner was hosting, he said, hey, I want you to play this on my episode. Like, I want this played. Can we put a commercial halfway through? And Lorne was like, fine. And it was a go. And it was one of his most popular sketches like that. School for Famous Comedians, I think it's called, if you want to look it up and watch it. Something like that. But like one of the ones that is still talked about in Albert Brooks lore. So definitely a good thing that SNL ended up running it for many reasons, like for historical reasons and just the legend of Albert Brooks. But yeah, that's his tie into SNL.
Next, he's talking about Taxi Driver.
Yeah, so his first dramatic role, like a lot of guys, I feel like anyone we talk about whose career popped before 1988, we basically tell this story of, they didn't even want to be a comedian when they started because that wasn't a job. Like even with Albert Brooks, like he looked at his father, and Carl Reiner was influenced on it. He looks at a radio guy and a TV writer, like stand-up comedian. And he talked about it in an interview where he says, like, to me, a stand-up comedian was Shecky Green having to go to Vegas. And he's like, I didn't want to do that. It didn't exist in the way that it did eventually with Pryor and Carlin and Eddie Murphy and all these guys. So Albert Brooks was like, that's not a life for me. I want to be an actor. I want to perform. And because of all these variety shows that he was doing, Martin Scorsese, who was making a little film called Taxi Driver, you may have heard of it, which at the time was kind of a nothing movie, like an independent film that wasn't a huge splash at the box office or anything. But Martin Scorsese, obviously, now we know, a great filmmaker, has always wanted to use comedians in his stuff because it gives for certain roles, I think he feels it has a more natural feel to it. And so he saw what Albert Brooks was capable of and put him in Taxi Driver.
So you really are the comic relief in this very dark film. I think Paul Schrader told you it was the only character in the script he didn't understand.
Yes, that's exactly right. He the part wasn't written, so we rehearsed for a couple of weeks in a hotel, and at the end, he said, "I wanted to thank you very much because that was the only guy I really didn't know." And I said, "That's the only guy in the movie that doesn't kill 60 people." How screwed up are you? That's really all he does is work at a store. What's that? So, but that was, it was a huge, great first experience to break into a movie.
It is the beauty of comedians too, and why I think guys like Scorsese like using them, like why he liked having like Rickles and guys in his films, is because there are certain roles where you need just a human being. And sometimes like actors are used to playing something more dramatic or over the top or something like that. But like if you need a person, a lot of times a comedian can pull that off better than or more naturally than a lot of the actors you're going to find. And that's a capability that Albert Brooks certainly had.
Next, we have offers.
So I was interested to hear some of the offers he turned down, and this speaks again to his how picky he was in a very good way. That obviously led him to having the exact career he wanted, but he turned down a lot of good roles that you could definitely see him in.
Now, at this point, you're kind of your work as an actor slows down a little bit because you did go on to make several films in the next few years on your own, After Real Life, Modern Romance, and then Lost in America. So your next really meaty part is in broadcast news. Were you getting other offers? Were you getting other offers in that time that you passed on because
Scott, I got the most offers. I mean, I always wished that in Hollywood, if you could get a firm offer on a contract, you could take it to like a window and get paid a tenth just to say no, because that's what I was getting. All of these, from Dead Poets Society to Big to the Richard Gere part in Pretty Woman.
I feel like Big with Albert Brooks is a very different movie.
Oh yeah, 1000.
It's a darker sarcasm than Tom Hanks's boyish appeal.
I would once you start making your own films and you start on that cycle where you have to raise the money and it's 3 years. And if you stop, especially if you're directing it, if you stop at any part, you lose the momentum. You can't keep a crew. You can't keep, you got to strike while the iron's hot. So there were lots of great calls that I could not have taken because it was most important to me to make my own movies.
And that's the amazing thing about it. The thing I admire and appreciate the most about Albert Brooks is like he has these real Hollywood offers. And like I said, a lot of his movies, like broadcast news, he was nominated for an Oscar for. So he got praise for that, obviously. But a lot of his films, weren't necessarily box office smashes, but they were exactly what he wanted them to be. He said that's kind of the trade-off. When someone asked him about how do you handle your movies not being necessarily the box office successes of maybe some other films, he said, well, that's kind of the trade-off you have for getting full control. I made the movies I wanted. I could have been, maybe more successful monetarily and made movies I didn't want to make. But the trade-off is I got to make all the movies I wanted. So it's like that's kind of a beautiful, simple way of looking at it that I think a lot of people forget. It becomes very money driven. And Craig even mentioned just the Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival that as we record this, a lot of people are talking about. It's like to see that in comedy is so disheartening because it's people doing something that was a few weeks work for them. You know what I mean? Like it was one day's pay that they could have made up in a few weeks. And that's what's disheartening. Whereas Albert Brooks said, no, I'm going to spend months making these films and possibly miss out on massive opportunities because this is the movie I wanted to make. Like Real Life is such an interesting, his movie Real Life is such an interesting concept to me, where he, years before this was a popular thing, he kind of predicted, like that movie talks about the idea that people just want to watch real human beings in their lives. And then through the course of that film, you realize that Hollywood just gets in the way and fucks it all up. I mean, the idea that he predicted what is everything on television right now, like the idea of he called reality TV and TikTok and all of this decades before it came to fruition, speaks to the genius of Albert Brooks. And he looked at movies like that, or Defending Your Life, which is like literally it's what it sounds like, a man on death's basically in purgatory or whatever you want to call it, defending his life, like making the legal case for his life. And these films to me are so much more interesting than the idea of, well, now I'll admit I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of Albert Brooks and Big, but but I'm saying from a film standpoint that what he did was so much more interesting, even though it may have not have had the the audience acclaim that other people of his ilk got.
This is him on Playing a Bad Guy.
Yeah, so years later, this is like 2011. He plays a villain in a Ryan Gosling movie called Drive that he also got high praise for. But this again speaks to his choices and doing what he wanted, and I found his approach to this very interesting.
How did that come about? It is not exactly typecasting. So
no, it took a Danish director to make that happen, because I like, you know, I know I have that side of me. I wanted to play a villain. In between a couple of my movies, I went after I think there was like the second Mission Impossible that Philip Seymour Hoffman played. I had downtime and I wanted that part, but I couldn't convince an American director that, you know, oh, people will just laugh. Well, no, they won't. They'll believe it. But Nicholas Riffen was Danish, and I don't think he knew who I was. He said that when he was younger, he went and saw Lost in America and got scared when I yelled at Julie Haggerty. He was like impressionable at that age. You scared me to death. Okay, good. So I went to his house and we had a discussion, and he said, you know, he sort of played this game. Why do you think you should do this? I said, well, you can cast one of the 6 people who always play this part, but then you'll have a cliche movie and everybody will know what happens as soon as they come on screen. Yes, I think that too. I think so. And we talked. And then before I left, he had this front door with this little foyer. And I thought, should I do this? It's a cliche. And I thought, no, I'm going to do it. I pinned him up against the wall. And I grabbed his collar and I choked him. And I said very quietly, I'm physically a very strong, and I just want you to know. Now, the Danes are white to begin with. He turned clear. I could see right through his face into his earlobe. Okay, I believe you. Thank you very much. So, and then I found out that he and Ryan Gosling, that's who they wanted. But they were coy, so they could do it for scale.
kind of a ballsy move, though, because I feel like that could backfire. The idea of pinning the director up, even just for it could backfire for many reasons. But I just thought of the scene in Seinfeld where Jerry's trying to prove he cannot be funny. Is this funny? Am I funny? It's funny. I could see that being very difficult for a comedian. Like if that guy didn't react properly, it would be very embarrassing. So. Ballsy move by Albert Brooks, but like I said, he went after the roles he always wanted. Like when you look back at his career, like who gives a fuck if he was in Drive in 2011 or not? You know what I mean? He still would have been the legend of Albert Brooks, but it was another box he wanted to check off and show that he could do it, which is it really speaks to his integrity as a creator. And like I said, when he would pop up in things. Even if you were like, why is Albert Brooks in this? Like, he kind of knew he wanted to do it, and he was a great part of it.
Next, we have him talking about Kubrick.
Yeah, so he had these relationships with these great filmmakers. We talked about Scorsese. He had a relationship with Steven Spielberg, and apparently was friends with Stanley Kubrick. So, like, these great filmmakers really respected Albert Brooks, which says a lot.
Stanley Kubrick was a fan.
Yeah,
just found out.
He was a fan. We corresponded. We talked on the phone.
Were you considered for Barry Lyndon?
No,
or to play the computer in Hal in 2001.
I wish.
Hal.
I wish.
That's so sorry to have that kind of relationship with somebody like Kubrick. Yeah.
Well, he was a huge, important person in my life, because when Modern Romance came out, after the previews, they wanted changes that I just couldn't comprehend. And they said, well, you're not going to have a second week. And that was, a real gut punch. Stanley Kubrick, because he had this interest in jealousy, he told me this. And I think it wound up showing itself in Eyes Wide Shut. Oh, wow. But he loved the subject. Yeah. And he said, I got a hold of this. I've shown it to people. It's the best movie on jealousy I've ever seen. And he started to tell me about the movie business. He said, you're blaming yourself right now, aren't you? I said, of course. He said, it has nothing to do with you. How this movie is going to do is decided way before you even get to think about It's a corporate decision. If they're telling you they're not going to do a second week, it means there's no more advertising. You can't blame yourself. And he started to say, I had this trouble. He told me that 2001 they were going to throw away because they didn't like the way it was testing. And there was a famous disc jockey in New York who saw a screening and went crazy on the radio for it. And it turned everything around.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So anyway, we corresponded and I would write him. And then one day I said, maybe I'll come visit. No. That was it. Don't do that. I'm fine with you in LA. Don't come here.
So it is amazing. It's pretty rare. Like Woody Allen and Albert Brooks are two of the few examples I can think of that would have like these great filmmakers kind of admiring what they did. And it's nice to hear Albert Brooks, a comedian that's not entirely self-loathing, because I think a lot of comics kind of denigrate what they do. And Albert Brooks did have enough confidence to be like, no, these guys kind of respected me as well. A guy I thought a lot about when researching Albert Brooks was Louis C.K. He was kind of on this trajectory, I think, to be this weird filmmaker. And then something happened. I forget why he stopped making movies, but go see 4th of July. I really liked that. But like Louis C.K. had this kind of mentality of making things that he wanted. And we'll hopefully continue and start doing that again. But that's the only name I can really think of a guy like Albert Brooks. We've lost that level of creativity. I mean, there are guys doing things with podcasts and stand-up and things like that are sort of offbeat. But there are I do like a guy I talk about a lot that I love is Joe List. And he made that movie with Louis C.K., 4th of July, and also made a documentary recently about his film Tom Dustin. And I hear Joe List on podcasts all the time saying, I'm a fucking idiot. Why am I doing these like niche, obscure things no one's seeing? And like comparing himself to his peers in comedy. But as a fan of his, I'm like, no, I like that you're doing this. Keep doing this. Like keep making obscure documentaries and these kind of independent films that are for a small audience, because the audience that does appreciate you really appreciates them. Whereas someone that just makes some thing that's going to appeal to a wide audience, it doesn't mean as much to anyone, you know? So ultimately that's why I love a guy like Albert Brooks. And I think in a way, this podcast is kind of about appreciating comedians that do exactly what they wanted to do, whatever it is, whether you're a genius or otherwise, because it's why we spoke so glowingly of Carrot Top, you know? Like say what you want about Carrot Top. He was doing exactly what he wanted to do. He was making people laugh and had a successful career. Whereas when you compare him to someone like Gallagher was just bitter and angry and hated everything he did, where it's like, why are you doing it then? Stop smashing the watermelons if you hate it so. I don't understand this. But Albert Brooks never faced that, luckily.
Next we have Jack Benny lesson.
Yeah, so this is him telling Mark Maron about a lesson he learned from Jack Benny. For you young folk out there, Jack Benny was host of The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson. Very influential in comedy of his time. And Albert Brooks tried to get him to do something and learned a very valuable lesson.
We go to see Jack Benny because we found the so-called Albert Brooks show.
Right.
And we produced this great old time radio show with much of the actors that worked on My Dad and the Real Orchestra and the great tinny sound. And I wanted to have a feud with Jack Benny.
Yeah.
So we get a meeting with Jack Benny on Tuesday. He dies that Friday, which nobody knew meeting him.
Yeah.
But we're sitting in his office and I say to him, so Mr. Benny, I'm doing a record album, and on this record album, I would love if you would do something, because we're doing this old time radio, and I never got any other word out. My hero says to me, 3 days before he dies. Radio. That's all I'm remembered for. I've done everything. I've done television. I've done movies. And I'm going, I don't even know you from radio. Oh my God. No, I know that. And Harry and I left. I drove home, Mark, with a profound, maybe one of the most profound lessons of my life, which is you better not hold on to anything.
Yeah.
Because if the God of comedy, in my mind, doesn't even know 3 days before he dies how important he was, if he's still going, and you and I get it as we get older.
It's happening to me now.
Okay, so you just can't go there. If you try to hold on to your life, you're going to be really sad.
There's a real beauty to the subtext of him telling Mark Maron that story, of all people. But I thought it was a great story, and I also thought it spoke to kind of Albert's philosophy, where he's like, don't do things that are going to make you bitter at the end of the day. Don't take a job as some sitcom dad, and not even that that's a bad thing, but if it's going to make him miserable, don't do it. Don't do it for the paycheck, which is, again, something in this current climate of comedy. I think something a lot of guys could take as advice.
Okay.
But I just thought that was a great story, which is why I wanted to include it. We have one more, I think, Albert Brooks clip, right, before we get to our grand finale?
Yep, films. It's a quick one.
Yeah, so this is him just talking about more to what I've been saying about his kind of philosophy on filmmaking.
I think it's, when you start to think that you can possibly make films, then you think, well, that makes sense. You put your blood here, and then at least it's there.
And you have total control. You're not worrying about an audience. You can make decisions.
Well, by the way, as it turns out, I think you have more control doing stand-up than anywhere anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's hard to get total control anymore. But yes, I had total control because I was in it.
Yeah.
So if they wanted something that I didn't like, I would say, you have to find someone who looks like me.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people, particularly talented people, don't realize that ability enough, that they can tell networks no and do things. And this current time, you're able to do that now more than ever. It was much more ballsy for Albert Brooks to tell people no in 1975 or whatever than it is now, because now there's so many, even if you do it with the industry, there's 15 different streaming services and all these other platforms that you can do things with on top of doing it on your own. So people should take from that lesson from the great Albert Brooks. Of course, like I said, a certain generation knows him from Finding Nemo, which he did say, this is kind of amazing. I've never heard this level of typecasting, where he wanted to do more voiceover work. And then when he got Finding Nemo, he was so that movie was so popular that when he tried to get more voiceover work, people were like, oh no, everyone knows you as Nemo. And he's like, well, what the fuck? I've had a 40-year career. What do you mean they know me as Nemo? He's been typecast in a movie he's not even physically in. It's just his voice.
Yeah.
So aside from that, he's had a truly amazing career and the perfect kind of career. Obviously, everyone kind of fantasizes about the most amount of money you can get to some degree. But I think if you're being realistic, what's the best for like a happy lifestyle? I look at guys like Martin Mull and Albert Brooks and people like that who did things their way and can also probably to some degree just go out to a diner when they want to. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that Albert Brooks is getting chased down the street as often as Steve Martin or someone like that. So kind of the perfect career that Albert Brooks has carved out for himself because he has that mystique. He hasn't overexposed himself. He's viewed as a genius even late into life. He hasn't lived long enough to become the villain despite living a long and prosperous life. So shout out to Albert Brooks. You're the kind of person we appreciate here on Why Are You Laughing? And we end, as we so often try to. I did mention that Albert Brooks' brother is the great Bob Einstein, of who I love most as Marty Funkhauser on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think the best side character on Curb is Marty Funkhauser, in my opinion.
That's not even close.
Other people know him as Super Dave Osborne, and some know him as the greatest talk show guest on the greatest talk show of all time. A lot of people think the Norm Macdonald Live peaked on episode 1 because Super Dave Osborne was so good, and this is him getting frustrated at one of Norm's bits that he was doing throughout the episode.
Here's the thing. My favorite story of all time is Pistorius.
Oh, yes.
The runner.
Tell who Pistorius is.
Well, you know who Pistorius is.
No, but for the viewers that don't know.
Doesn't know.
Well, the viewers that don't
South
know.
African gentleman.
Well, some viewers don't know.
A kid.
Well, he should tell it to some of the viewers that don't know who Pistorius is.
He's an Olympic runner who ran with blades. Everyone knows who he is.
Well, I wouldn't say ran with blades.
I didn't ask you what you would say
that's
right
true.
now.
That's,
You're
I mean,
off
no,
drugs.
that's true. I am off
Okay,
drugs.
listen. What about that Dormer, this guy who killed the cops?
Yeah, explain to the folks.
I don't want to explain anything. Everything I say, I'm going to leave.
No, I've heard people say that.
This is the cheapest thing I've ever been involved
No,
in.
I've heard people say that.
If I didn't love you, I would be so gone now. I can't tell you.
I've heard people say that.
Here is
Explain
the
to the
thing.
folks who that is.
Dormer,
yes, Christopher Dorner.
Yeah. Okay.
Explain to the folks who he was.
Tall.
He was the
African-American
police
great-looking
officer.
guy. His arms are like this. He can't take a bad picture. Even his mugshot was great. You know, I went to a tennis match in Indian Wells.
Yeah.
And I saw Rafael Nadal play. He's my favorite.
Rafael Nadal. Explain to the folks who Rafael Nadal
Oh,
is.
my God.
Of course, Rafael
Yes,
Nadal. I'll
but-
explain.
Okay.
Rafael Nadal is a tennis player, only 26, but seemingly beyond his prime.
Great player.
Abs like.
Great player. But here's the thing.
You like his abs?
I think that if Kim Kardashian were to go to Vegas, she could do Carrot Top's act and take things out of her ass. That's what Nadal reminded me of.
That's a pretty solid idea.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't understand that.
I don't either, but
Well,
I just,
you know,
I
Carrot Top
respect
takes
that
things
idea.
out of a trunk.
Yeah, I see.
She could take it out. Am I going to have to explain everything to you?
No, to the
You
folks,
really can't-
explain
oh,
who
no,
Kim Kardashian is. Because I think the joke was predicated on knowing that she has a big ass. Wasn't it?
People don't know that.
Young people don't know.
Everybody knows. Have you seen the pictures of her?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
I think if you told me that I love the variety of guests on Norm Macdonald Live, but I think if you told me he could only ever have one guest on that show, it would be Super Dave Osborne, Bob Einstein. He knew how to play with Norm and Adam Egget so perfectly. We could have also played the montage of him insulting Adam Egget, which is also great.
Excellent.
We'll save that for another day. But that one of my favorite podcast episodes of all time for sure. But I believe, at least I've always perceived it this way. I believe the Albert Brooks episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm was like an homage to Bob Einstein. They never acknowledge really that Marty Funkhauser died, at least in any big way. But the first season that Marty Funkhauser was no longer in the show, they have an alive funeral for Albert Brooks, and it's Albert Brooks's first appearance, which was, I didn't love the last few seasons of Curb, but that was one of the funnier episodes of the season that it was in. So shout out to Albert Brooks for doing that as well. And hope we did Albert Brooks justice. I'm sure there's plenty of his filmography and other things that we did not get to. But like I said, go watch the documentary. They did it. I don't know if they did it better than us. They had a pretty good lineup. Tell me if one of these names doesn't seem like the others do you, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
They had Larry David, Jon Stewart, Chris Rock, David Letterman, and Brian Williams. But bizarre. All of a sudden, I'm like, is that Brian Williams? What a strange addition to this
News
group.
broadcaster?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the very same.
Okay. I'm like, there's got to be a comic Brian Williams I don't remember.
No, I found it very odd. but check out the documentary. It's basically me remembering what I saw in that documentary, among other things. So check that out. But we appreciate you watching this and supporting this program. And we have a lot of fun covering all these people. So submit more ideas because we'll definitely get to. Even if you've submitted in the past, feel free to submit it in the future, just so I don't forget. But we have a long list of people we still have to get to. So go back to the archives if you haven't heard all the episodes, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, I guess, as well as YouTube if you want to watch the video version. Now on Monday nights, for those of you that don't know, we've been premiering Monday nights this season of Why You Laughing, I guess you could call it. But it's available, all the time. So blindmike.net is where you get all those links. We appreciate you guys supporting the show. Verygoodshow.org.
Sure.
Yeah, go there.
Go see if it's still alive.
Blow off the cobwebs, see what's there, and support Craig. And we will talk to you guys next time on Why Are You Laughing?
Zip it up and zip it out.